As Israel begins large-scale ground operations in Gaza, it is crucial to recognize that it will be impossible to defeat Hamas quickly. In the nearly 4 weeks since the reprehensible attacks on October 7 by Hamas, Israel has initiated a profound transformation with repercussions that will be felt for years. As Israeli forces enter the more challenging phases of a ground campaign against Hamas, 2 key themes emerge. Firstly, it's vital to grasp that this isn't just another cycle of conflict in Gaza. Success requires acknowledgement of a war of exceptional scope and difficulty, potentially enduring for many months. Israel will need to implement military strategies rooted in long war paradigms, coupled with a multi-year counterinsurgency campaign utilizing diplomatic, informational, and economic tools. In this extensive mission, lessons can be gleaned from past campaigns, including those from earlier periods in the country's history. Yet there's a necessity for steadfastness, patience, and agility in navigating a war that in many aspects differs from any previous conflicts Israel has faced. Secondly, the massacre of at least 1,200 Israelis by Hamas death squads revealed a catastrophic collapse of Israel's existing security strategy. The failure of Israeli intelligence and security forces, coupled with their overseers in the government, is significant. The old deterrence model, assuming that Hamas could be contained through defensive technology and occasional limited operations in Gaza, is now obsolete. The Israeli defense establishment must consider bold new approaches at every level to prevent such disasters in the future. The outcome hinges on how well Israel can achieve its challenging war goals against Hamas, and how swiftly it can establish a new and effective security paradigm in the aftermath of the conflict. Beyond Gaza, Israel must address the broader network of threats and armed groups backed by Iran, menacing the country on multiple fronts, including threats from Iraq, Lebanon, Syria, Yemen, and within the Palestinian population in the West Bank. The deterrence model that guided Israeli security policies in Gaza developed over many years. Following Israel's disengagement from Gaza in 2005 and Hamas seizing control in 2007, the Israeli government aimed to contain Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad, PIJ. This strategy relied on intelligence warnings, robust border defenses, and occasional force to deter further aggression. Periodic flare-ups escalated into larger military conflicts. The building of an extensive network of underground tunnels by Hamas was also evident. Despite their efforts to breach Israel's defenses, improvements in Israeli anti-rocket and anti-tunnel capabilities led to the failure of most Hamas operations, on the ground, underground, in the air, and at sea. Despite Hamas's growing capabilities, Israel considered its defense strategy effective. Hamas struggled to effectively strike Israel's population, faced significant retaliation for attempted strikes, and could receive material support for maintaining calm. Israeli officials concluded that attempting to outright destroy Hamas's forces would be too costly and might lead to new problems. This view was widely shared by Western officials, fearing that toppling Hamas would create a power vacuum, potentially requiring direct Israeli rule in Gaza, a prospect Israel has long avoided. Therefore, the Israeli government kept conflicts with Hamas relatively brief and of limited scope. Each episode, lasting from several days to a few weeks, typically concluded with a ceasefire facilitated by Egypt and accompanied by economic measures. This approach, coupled with Israel's tacit acknowledgement of Hamas's control in Gaza, served Prime Minister Netanyahu's objective of dividing the Palestinian system. Allowing Hamas to govern the Strip weakened the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank and avoided engaging in political dialogue with it. However, this strategy also permitted Hamas, backed by Qatar, to acquire the necessary resources to enhance its military capabilities significantly. Despite the increasing threat from Hamas's rocket arsenal, Israel refrained from forcefully disrupting Hamas's weapons programs except during intermittent, short-lived conflicts. In the interim, Hamas continued to devise new strategies to challenge Israel without triggering a broader escalation. For instance, starting in 2018, Hamas organized the Marches of Return, encouraging Palestinians to gather near the Israeli border fence. While perceived in the West as protests against Israel's Gaza blockade, these marches served as a cover for Hamas's military activities. Embedding armed fighters in the crowds, Hamas used them as a shield to approach the border fence and attempt attacks against the Israel Defense Forces and nearby Israeli communities. The IDFs successfully repelled these attackers, preventing a border breach by dispersing crowds with non-lethal weapons and targeting leaders, resulting in hundreds of casualties over many months. Nevertheless, the marches provided an opportunity for Hamas fighters to prepare for the offensive on October 7. In the weeks leading up to the October massacre, large gatherings near the border fence were observed again. On September 13, 6 Gazans died in an explosion, likely part of the attack preparations. Tractors were also brought to the border area in the weeks preceding October 7 under the guise of agricultural work, ultimately used to dismantle the fence and facilitate the actions of Hamas's death squads. Commencing extensive ground operations in Gaza, it's crucial to grasp that swiftly defeating Hamas is unattainable. Unlike most previous Israeli endeavors since the First Lebanon War in 1982, a prolonged campaign will be essential to diminish, isolate, and eventually eliminate Hamas from Gaza, similar to the U.S.-led coalition's years-long effort to defeat ISIS in Syria and Iraq. Achieving lasting results demands a comprehensive approach beyond force, encompassing diplomatic, informational, legal, and economic measures, with support from regional and international partners. The current campaign against Hamas cannot be modeled on past Gaza operations. Instead, Israeli strategists must draw inspiration from lengthier conflicts in the nation's history, such as the War of Independence, 1948–49, the War of Attrition, 1967–70, and Operation Defensive Shield in 2002. These conflicts provide valuable lessons, emphasizing continuous mobilization, whole-of-society efforts, and actions across multiple fronts, with results unfolding over an extended timeframe. However, they also highlight the high costs, potential risks, and deep national resolve required for prolonged campaigns. Operation Defensive Shield in 2002, a focused effort to eradicate Hamas and PA terror cells in the West Bank, was a turning point that effectively curtailed the Second Intifada. Yet the current threat from Hamas in Gaza is more intricate, with a heavily armed enemy concealed in dense urban areas amid a large civilian population. Hence, a more potent use of force is necessary, alongside efforts to avert a humanitarian crisis and counter intense Hamas propaganda in the global arena. While the long war approach has its challenges, Israel's extended campaign in Lebanon serves as a cautionary tale. Initiated in 1982 with the successful removal of armed Palestinian groups and the deportation of Yasser Arafat, it led to a prolonged conflict with Hezbollah, lasting until Israel's withdrawal in 2000. This experience has contributed to Israel's reluctance to engage in large ground operations, influencing its limited conflict strategy in Gaza. Expectations for the ongoing war against Hamas suggest it won't be confined to a singular offensive, but rather an extended series of military operations. The focus is currently on an intense offensive in Gaza, employing heavily armored ground units, extensive firepower from air, land, and sea, supported by intelligence. Facing well-prepared adversaries using civilians and sensitive locations for shields, Israel must confront Hamas in various terrains, from open areas and urban zones to tunnels, beaches, and even in the international media. Simultaneously, Israel must maintain a robust defensive strategy against incoming threats. Given crucial U.S. support, Israel needs to draw lessons from coalition warfare, uncommon in its military culture. As Winston Churchill stated, having allies is crucial, emphasizing continuous communication and coordination with partners globally and regionally. Defining victory against Hamas extends beyond military defeat and ending rule in Gaza. It requires addressing Hamas's influence elsewhere as an ideological and social movement deeply embedded in Palestinian society. Crushing it on the battlefield isn't sufficient. Countering its radical ideology and narratives, threatening both moderate Arab states and Israel, necessitates local and regional voices. With Al Jazeera supporting Hamas, visualizing destruction and suffering in Gaza, Israel's initial military successes must transition into sustained efforts to prevent resurgence and pave the way for a moderate alternative. In essence, Israel must mobilize Palestinian and regional parties for a sustainable solution.